And after all that, he reclaimed his title as the one and only Thor.
Jane?
Okay, so I have seen Thor Love and Thunder, and I'm going to make the first part of this video my kind of non-spoiler review, and then afterwards you'll get a fair warning, there will be spoilers, and I'll delve a bit more into the movie. I just want to say before I go into it that it's very hard to hear myself back in this helmet, so it's quite odd speaking to you on camera at the moment. But secondly, I really don't want to be negative on this channel. I know a few of you have said that I've been a bit more negative lately, what with Star Wars and all things like that. The Boys has been a real breath of fresh air. It's really allowed me to do some positive stuff, and I've really enjoyed making those videos. So I want to kind of, going forward, make more positive stuff because it's better for me and I think it's better for you. And I have to say, I really thought that Thor Love and Thunder was going to be a positive video home run. For weeks, when people have been saying, oh, you've been a bit negative on this, been a bit negative on that, I've been thinking, well, don't worry, because when the first week of July comes round, it'll be Positivity Street, it'll be the finale of The Boys, and it'll be Thor Love and Thunder. There's no way Taika Waititi is going to screw this up. There's no way this movie is going to be bad. I really thought I was going to enjoy it, and I think it's one of those rare movies where the trailers I really enjoyed and I thought made the film look like it was going to at least have a decent story and some decent character work.
These hands were once used for battle. Now they're but humble tools for peace.
Even if some of the green screening and volume tech didn't quite look up to par, I was also hoping that a lot of that stuff would look better in motion, and I thought at the very least we were going to get a movie like Ragnarok, which, you know, whilst not visually groundbreaking, is a really fun time, really added to the mythos of Thor in the MCU, and was funny and had a lot of heart. And it's with a heavy heart that I have to say that, yeah, whilst there's a few bits in Thor Love and Thunder I did enjoy, and I can't say that I didn't laugh, or that it didn't breeze by and wasn't an easy watch, it is a catastrophic misstep, both as a sequel to Ragnarok and for director Taika Waititi. And it's a movie that, even though it was like delayed by an extra year and was announced like almost 3 years ago now, feels really rushed, and it feels like it skips over some of the big emotional beats that it feels like it's serving up on a plate. There's lots of themes that seem like they're going to lead to more interesting stuff.
So this is my vow. All gods will die.
That are just like lightly explored, and the whole movie just feels like it's more concerned with telling gags, which half the time don't quite hit. I've seen people refer to it as like a gigantic SNL sketch, and I don't think those criticisms are really like unfounded. I can see that in a lot of it.
It could be a trap.
Are you thinking what I think you're thinking?
I'm thinking it.
What are we thinking?
Thinking what? I'm thinking it too.
It's just a real shocker. I'm really shocked that this wasn't as good as Ragnarok, or at least a good movie. I think it's a real misstep for the MCU in general, and after a string of things have come out that I've really not particularly enjoyed, I'm really saddened by this one. I think Thor has now been hit with like the inverse Star Trek sequel numbering curse, rather than the even ones being good. It's the odd Thor movies that are good. So the first one was really good, Ragnarok was really good, and we now have Thor 2 and Thor 4 as the kind of bitter disappointments.
Well, you're right.
I think what's most strange about this movie is that it doesn't feel like Taika Waititi directed it, especially not off the back of Ragnarok and Jojo Rabbit, which I really enjoyed. I really had a lot of faith in him as a filmmaker to at least give us something to chew on with this one. But it kind of feels like what Thor the Dark World feels like to Thor 1. It feels like they got another director in who isn't as competent as Kenneth Branagh to sort of make a poor man's version of the first movie. That's what it feels like in terms of Ragnarok to Love and Thunder. It feels like they brought someone on who wasn't Taika Waititi, but was willing to kind of try and recreate the magic to lessened results. I just don't really know what went wrong with this one. I feel like Gorr the God Butcher is a fantastic villain, and he has what I think is the best scene of the movie early on. A scene that occurred and made me think that this movie was going to kick ass. I really enjoyed his introduction, and I thought, oh, maybe the critical consensus is a bit warped. Maybe we're going to get a great movie after all. And then everything after that scene feels incredibly rushed, sometimes incoherent, and it's just a paper-thin plot. There's not really a second act to speak of, and the whole reason for the second act coming to pass feels like ultimately just busy work to stretch out the time in between what happens at the end of the first act and the resolution of that problem in the third act. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but what they gain from the end of the second act is just completely pointless. They essentially gain a super weapon that has no bearing on making it any easier or worse to defeat Gorr, and I'm stood there like, why is Thor saying, oh yes, well, things might be on the downer, but I've got this new super weapon right next to my other super weapon and my reassembled old super weapon. Like, now we've got 3, I guess. Great. It's a real shame, because I think the Jason Aaron comic run was a perfect template to give us like a truly hefty Thor villain in Gorr, and Christian Bale is magnificent casting. I still think after seeing the movie, it was the right decision to just put him in kind of minimal makeup rather than making him look like the comic version, because it allows Christian Bale to actually act. And at the very least, he isn't phoning it in. You can tell he's having a merry time, and he's one of the highlights of the movie.
How exciting!
But on the flip side, like King Valkyrie, I would say, is wasted. I think there's far too much Korg, and the decision to make Korg narrate parts of the movie, as seen in the trailer, so it's not too much of a spoiler, just makes the whole thing come across really self-indulgent.
Kids, get the popcorn now. Let me tell you the story.
And as for Dr. Jane Foster, wow, they really screwed that up. I was really excited for the Mighty Thor. I actually think it's a really cool idea to give her Mjolnir and the powers, and it just didn't really come together. And it's weird because they obviously skipped over Jane and Darcy and Selvig and the Warriors 3 from Dark World going into Ragnarok, and I think that was ultimately the right decision to sort of take it off in a new, fresh direction. But when it was announced with Thor: Love and Thunder that Jane would be coming back and Sif would be coming back, I thought, oh, cool. So what they're basically going to do is they're going to rejig the elements from the first 2 Thor movies that weren't quite working in a similar way to what they did with Thor in Ragnarok. Rather than just focusing on Thor this time around, they were going to bring in the other elements from the earlier movies and give them a bit of a revamp. But I actually think this might be Natalie Portman's worst turn as Jane Foster, which is insane, because theoretically she has the most to do in this one, and she's been given all these crazy new powers and a swanky new hammer, but I just think the comedy with her character really didn't play for me. I think maybe, even though this film is completely different tonally, I think the humour of the Batman, in which the character of Batman is always really serious and plays a lot of things straight, and it is the other characters' reactions to him playing things straight that produces the humour, would have been a far better direction to go in with this Jane Foster character, rather than her just sort of like being recharacterised as another goofball in the movie, much like all the other characters. Like, some of the lines she delivers and some of the things she says just don't feel consistent with what we had before.
Let's bring the rainbow.
And it's quite jarring, and a lot of it isn't very funny, but then I can't just blame Jane Foster for that, because there's large stretches of the movie that are quite painful and quite unfunny. I'd say the highlight for me in terms of the comedy was Zeus. I thought Russell Crowe delivered a hilarious performance that was very wacky. His Greek accent left something to be desired. He sounded a bit more like Borat than someone from the Greek Isles. But in terms of just making me laugh, that was something, I guess. Even if his entire role in the movie could be axed and you wouldn't lose a thing. There's something that happens in the end of the first act which could be addressed going immediately into the second, and there would be no need for the trip to Omnipotent City. I think I said that right. There would be no need for that trip at all. It's really bizarre. It just feels like maybe Taika really cared about delivering a good movie with the first one, and then obviously he went and did Jojo Rabbit. He's now been given a Star Wars movie. He's no doubt going to keep making more of his own movies. He's got things like Our Flag Means Death, and I think he's created Reservation Dogs as well and stuff like that. So he's got like a lot of projects that are worth his time, and maybe this was just something he didn't really care about. It certainly comes across that way anyway, which is maddening and saddening. And the spectacle is really wishy-washy. There's not really one sequence in the film that I really enjoyed, aside from this one moment where they go to a world devoid of colour and the monsters in it act and move a little bit like the monsters in the PS3 game Limbo. That was a bit of a nice nostalgia hit. That's probably the most creative visual sequence. Everything else is just showing the pitfalls of the volume technology, which is groundbreaking and incredible. But if you haven't got a director of cinematography like Greg Fraser, who worked with volume on The Mandalorian and The Batman, then it's really going to look almost worse than some of the green screening we've had in the MCU so far. Some of those shots that have been bandied about of like Natalie Portman in New Asgard, or that shot that everyone's tearing into of Thor in front of like a grassy garden using a lightning bolt, that all looks just as bad in the finished film. And it's a real shame because some of the planets they go to still have that kind of stellar production design and art design as was in Ragnarok. It's just the way these visuals are constructed and presented. Lots of the characters often feel like they're just standing around against green screen. There's no depth to the image. And then on top of that, you've got, what I think is the most egregious thing about the movie, visually, is CGI helmets. Why? Why do we have CGI helmets? You need to start paying your VFX artists properly, and you need to start hiring people to make practical helmets and make more practical sets and more practical items and weapons, because it makes a huge difference. Natalie Portman's helmet in the movie looks atrocious, as does Thor's. And I really also thought that some of the costume design was really cool. My favourite Thor outfit was probably when he's in the World Tree vest, and he's got like the jeans on with the red sleeveless leather jacket and like the classic yellow Thor boots. That was a really cool look, and I almost could have had him dressed like that for the whole movie, because his actual Thor outfit in this one is just a disgusting blend of like gold, silver, blue and red, and it just doesn't work at all. It's just way too wacky, and it surprises me again because all of his looks in Ragnarok are top notch, and the soundtrack is used better in Ragnarok. There's some great moments of action. Like I love the gladiatorial fight with Hulk. I love the ending when they're sort of they're having like a spaceship chase to the Devil's Anus. And even the finale when he lands on the bridge, you know, and Led Zeppelin's blaring and he's got the twin swords and he's just tearing into dudes, like... Great moments. The fight with Surtur at the start is probably some of the best hammer action we've gotten. And there's just nothing of note in this. There's no awesome moments with Jane Foster's Thor, action-wise. There's no good moments with Thor, action-wise. And Gorr the God Butcher doesn't really do much. and he's absent for large stretches of the movie. You often hear what he's getting up to rather than seeing it, and it just seems like a baffling choice. I think it's one of those movies that the more you think about it and the more you start to pick it apart, the worse it becomes. And in terms of my rankings between the Thor movies, I have to tell you, I'm really torn between whether I prefer Dark World or this. And I can't believe I'm saying that. I never in a million years thought, coming into this movie, a Taika Waititi Thor movie, the follow-up to Ragnarok, the follow-up to Infinity War and Endgame, that 3-movie stretch of Thor is the best he ever was in the MCU. It was awesome.
You know, I'm 1,500 years old. I've killed twice as many enemies as that, and every one of them would have rather killed me, but none succeeded. Thanos is just the latest in a long line of bastards, and he'll be the latest to feel my vengeance. Fate wills it so.
And to go to this is just... it's just insane. I really can't believe it. I'm really shocked. I really thought this was going to be a positive video. I thought I was going to have a lot of fun with it. But it's just a bit depressing, really. And I think, you know, whilst Thor the Dark World is a bit of a stinker of a movie, and I think it's probably cringier in terms of the humour. I really don't think the humour lands in that movie, and I really don't buy the romance between Thor and Jane and all that kind of stuff. And Malekith is equally a sucky villain. I think there's far better craft in that movie. There's a better use of real sets. The final battle takes place in a real location in Greenwich University, just down the road. By the way, watching Thor the Dark World in a Greenwich cinema on opening night back in 2013 was one of the funniest experiences I've ever had with a Marvel movie, because any time there was a reference to Greenwich or a shot in Greenwich that was like less than a mile away from the cinema we were in, the whole screen just erupted in laughter. Just I guess at the absurdity of the fact that we were sat right where there was supposed to be this cataclysmic universe ending threat. And that was a lot of fun.
Here. Greenwich.
More fun than I had in this movie. I was actually quite surprised. I saw it at the Waterloo IMAX, and I've now seen it twice. And the first time I saw it, I was shocked at how little laughs there were throughout the theatre. I don't think people really vibed with it at all, and that's a real shame. But anyway, getting back to this versus Thor: The Dark World, I don't know. I think I would probably watch Thor: The Dark World over this. I think it's more rewatchable. I think even though it's not a good movie, there's at least a couple of scenes which do hit emotionally, like the scene with Thor and Loki in like the Asgardian boat when they're drifting through the Dark World, and they talk about their mother, and you know Loki's like, "Who put me here?" And he's like, "Oh, you know damn well who put you there."
Who put me there? You know damn well. You know damn well.
And they have that kind of conflict. Obviously, it's building off of better movies in Thor 1 and the Avengers, but I still think that's a great scene. The ending where Thor and Malekith are bumping between different portals and stuff is fun. The assault on Asgard is a pretty decent action scene. I don't get me wrong. I don't want you to think I'm a Thor: The Dark World apologist, or that there's some revisionist history going on and actually that movie was incredible. But it at least got the basics right. It looked prettier than this. It had more practical elements. It was paced better, and I think even though it took itself more seriously, I think that was a better ordeal. This movie is just like gorging on cotton candy, and you're getting no vegetables, no protein. You're not going to end up like Thor at the end of this. Oh no, the cape's come off. Shall I retie it? I'll retie it. Whilst I retie my cape, this is going to be the spoiler warning for Thor: Love and Thunder. So I think we should just get right into it. Why does the hammer call to Jane to sort of rescue her from her terminal illness, only for the film to later reveal that using the hammer is killing her and speeding up the process. That doesn't seem to check out to me because, the hammer seems to have some sort of sentience and know the situation. And to find out later that this is actually speeding up the process kind of implies, well, maybe if she didn't become Thor at all, would she have survived? Did she need to pick up the hammer? Didn't it kind of hinder her recovery in a way? That didn't seem to make much sense. I hated everything with the captured kids, but purely because you capture like a big classroom of kids and you barely get to know any of them. There's not really a reason to care about them as characters. They're like, obviously they need to rescue the children because they're innocent and they're going to get butchered by the God Butcher. But like, I don't know them as characters. Even Heimdall's son doesn't really get anything meaningful to do. So they just exist as a plot point. And as I was saying in the non-spoiler part of this, the kids get captured at the end of Act 1. And then the Thor gang are like, we need to go to Omnipotent City to raise an army. And then almost immediately, as soon as they get there, they realise that's not going to work. And then Valkyrie's like, oh, but wait a minute, we could get Zeus's lightning bolt. That would be really useful. And it's like, you haven't set up any significance to this weapon. It's just another Stormbreaker, essentially. It's just Zeus's Stormbreaker. There's no need for it. They've already got 2 massive, super powerful weapons on their team. They've got all the skills to defeat Gorr. So when you come out of Omnipotent City at the end of the second act, it just feels like a complete aside that didn't mean anything. I also thought it was really lazy to just come up with a city where all of the gods are. It could have been Mount Olympus, because the only god there that matters in terms of the interaction with our characters is Zeus. So it could have just been they went to Mount Olympus and they met a couple of Greek gods. But even at that, as funny as it was to see Russell Crowe like twirl around the lightning bolt and flick Thor's clothes off. Flick! Oh! And be like, no, you can't have this lightning bolt. It just led nowhere. The film just doesn't really explore what it means for a bunch of gods to be hanging around in Omnipotent City, not helping people, not doing anything, thinking of themselves. And in turn, that doesn't get examined for Thor. There's nothing really kind of internal going on. It's all very surface level. And the romance between him and Jane, I really thought they were going to beef it out from the previous movies because it never really quite worked. And I was sat halfway through this movie thinking, yeah, it still doesn't really work. I don't really buy their chemistry. And as a result, when she dies at the end, it doesn't feel earned. And also in a movie where like there's so many death fake outs, like with Korg and Zeus, and it's so light and fluffy as a movie, it just feels so completely unearned for Jane to die. I actually, when it was happening, I wasn't feeling emotional. I was more just kind of like expecting something to turn things around at the last second. And then when she actually like dissipated and died, I was like, oh fuck, I guess they have killed her. Like, it just didn't really come to any kind of satisfying resolution. And I thought for Gorr's daughter to be resurrected and then being given to Thor as her, and for Thor to be her new guardian was just kind of an ending that came out of nowhere. I guess supposed to give Thor some kind of renewed sense of purpose. I mean, it just feels really lazy. Like, oh, he's come away from Endgame and from fighting all those superhero battles, and he doesn't want to pick up the hammer anymore. And he wants to be a man of peace, and his battling days are over. All that stuff that was implied in the trailers sort of made me think it was going to be a really interesting character study and a bit of a hangout movie.
I need to figure out exactly who I am. My superheroing days are over.
And instead, the resolution is just, I'll give him a kid. He just needs a kid. Just do the Star Wars method. When we don't know what to do with these characters, just give them a kid to save and hang out with. That'll work. Great. I thought it was really lame to give the kids the power of Thor. It's one of those like weird meta things where you can tell like they've given the kids the powers in the finale to sort of make the kids in the audience be like, oh yeah, like see, like now we can all go to the playground and like we can all get imbued with the power of Thor and we're all Thor. But I don't know. I don't know, but like when I was a kid, I never found any of that kind of stuff exciting in movies when they sort of did it from the kids' perspective. You always want to be the adults in the kids' movies, right? You want to be Thor, you want to be Valkyrie, you want to be Jane Foster, you want to be Korg. So I just feel like kids on the playground coming away from this are just going to cast themselves as those characters when they're play fighting. I don't feel like you're going to get anything out of like, oh yes, we've all got the power of Thor, we're kids. It was just really lame. I really just didn't think that this movie would be in the bottom half of MCU movies, and I'm quite stunned, but I just can't really fathom a reason to come back to it. It's not particularly funny, the spectacle is pretty woeful, there's some fun interactions and a few gags that land, but there's not enough substance in the storytelling, and I didn't really get any emotional resonance from it. I didn't think it was particularly heartbreaking at the end. And I think it's left Thor in a really weird position, because he went from being completely revamped and upgraded from Dark World to Age of Ultron to finally Thor Ragnarok, where they started taking the character seriously again, or at least, in terms of like where they wanted to take the character story-wise. And then obviously you had Infinity War and Endgame. I honestly thought we were going to continue the streak. I thought, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to see where Thor ends up next. But now I'm kind of wondering if it really had a reason to be. And I think maybe Thor 5 would benefit from another shake-up similar to Ragnarok. Like, Taika Waititi's got enough on his plate. He's already doing enough cool things. Why not give it to a new director who can give it a completely new visual style and revamp the character? And maybe give the character a rest for a couple of years. Like, let's not have another Thor movie in 2 years' time. Let's maybe leave it like 4 years, 5 years, which I know is the gap between Ragnarok and this, but obviously he was in Infinity War and Endgame, so it's really a 3-year gap. Let's actually have 4 to 5 years of no Hemsworth Thor. Let it simmer on a low heat for a bit, and then bring it back with some fresh ideas. I really thought Jane Foster and Thor were going to go off together, and she was going to become like the new co-lead of the franchise, and the pair of them would go off on more adventures, and it would be really well handled. But instead, like the ticking time bomb of her illness and how it relates to her using the powers just didn't play for me at all. And I think it's a real shame, because Natalie Portman's probably one of the best actors the MCU has ever been given, and they've completely and utterly squandered her, and now it's too late. But anyway, that was my thoughts on Thor Love and Thunder. I will be doing a video on the boys finale, probably going to come out Monday, and spoilers aside, I think that'll be a much more positive video, because that finale kicked arse. Anyway, I'm off. A big thank you to my full fat tier patron, Dr. Chike. If you'd like to donate money to my Patreon, you can find me at patreon.com/fullfatvideos,